Check.
Okay, awesome. Hi, I think I know everyone, but I am going to do a quick introduction. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, oh, you can see my notes. Is that what's happening right now? Okay. Okay, we're going to go. Can you see my notes? Is that, yes?
Yeah, we can still see your notes.
Just a little bit, though.
Better than the bottom. We're just gonna go without notes, and I'm just gonna make it up as I go. Okay. So, as Ryan said, my name's Cheyanne. I'm the head coach at the Rideau Canoe Club. I've been coaching for about 10 years now, and Ryan asked me here today to talk about sort of supporting the junior athlete. I've been lucky enough to coach some athletes that had quite a bit of international success this year. I started coaching at Rideau in the summer while I was in university. I've worked at small clubs in New Zealand as well for one of the winters. I worked in Carleton Place for a season, and then in 2015 I came back to Rideau, and since then it's been like it's sort of a journey towards being the head coach. But I started off in the U14 program a couple of years ago. So the athletes that are sort of 18, 19, 20 now and sort of starting to reach their potential. I started with many of them when they were U10, U12, U14, 5 to 7 years ago. So kind of been with them throughout this journey, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about over the next couple of slides. You'll notice a lot of parallels between stuff actually that Lois talked about and a lot of stuff that Jason talked about. Jason and I actually spoke last night. He was doing a presentation for our club, and we realized we were both presenting, and we compared notes, and there's a lot of similarities here. So as we go through, I'll try to make some connections to some of the previous presentations as well. But specifically, the two athletes that I'm going to talk about the most are Ella Hodgson Pajot and Toshka Bishara Herbaka. They both won a bronze medal in the 200 at Junior Worlds this year. Ella in C1 and Toshka in K1, and that was sort of like the visible part or the pinnacle of what we've been working towards for the last 5 or 6 years with them. And I still remember, you know, Ella coming down to the club like as a 12-year-old, like holding her mom's hand and stuff, and Toshka like wandering down, and she lives like really close to the club, so she just showed up one day. So just talking about kind of their journey and our journey together, and sort of some of the stuff that we've focused on. All right, so in my mind, when I'm talking about athlete development, I break it up into quads, like 4 years, and then just really for convenience, because that's how people's lives are set up. Usually, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog scratching at the door. I thought he would go away. So talking about quads, you know, people come into the sport somewhere between 10 and 12 years old for the most part, and then we have them for approximately 4 years while they're still in elementary school. And for me, that is, you know, we're in summer camp for most of the season. Maybe they're not doing winter training, maybe they are. There's a big focus on skills. You know, I always push that at least for those first 4 years, when they're developing water skills and water confidence, we're doing both canoe and kayak, we're doing war canoe, we're doing sup boards. We're really trying to teach that sort of intangible comfort on the water, because it's going to set them up for success later on. And the focus is on fun. And the thing that I tell all my coaches that work for me in the summer camp, and something that I really live by, is that your number one job as a coach is to make sure your athlete is having fun at practice. And that can mean a bunch of different things. Like, what is fun? It's different for different people. It's different at different ages. Sometimes it's more achievement oriented. Sometimes it's effort oriented. Sometimes it's socially oriented. But for the most part, when they're kids, it means, you know, we do band sleepovers. You know, we have costume parties. We go to water parks. We have inside jokes. We run an Instagram for the kids. Everything, like, instead of going for a run, we go for an adventure run. because the kid who isn't enjoying themselves isn't going to come back. And at that point, as a coach, you're done because they're not there anymore. So you can make them work as hard as you want, but if they don't come back, then there's really no point. So that's sort of like the hook, right? That's where, Lois talked about how important it was to have a group of friends and how you share those experiences. But somehow those friends have to get made. And so in my mind, the first couple of years, summer camp is like, we have to create scenarios where athletes are making friends and they're having fun and they're gaining their confidence. And they're learning how to train. And as we move towards the higher end of U14, they're learning how to train, and they love it because they're training with their friends. And really intentionally creating a training group. Specifically, the way we personally have things, or personally at the Rideau Canoe Club, the way we have things organized is sort of like gendered age groups. So this picture of Ella and Toshka is from when they were U14 girls. And Toshka is a kayaker, but she's canoeing here. That's why I included this picture. And so they really were a team from the beginning, even though they don't really do the same sport. And sorry, one thing about this last one. So I'm talking about these two athletes as examples of people who sort of moved through this program, but it really, like, applies to everyone. All 107 athletes who are at the Rideau Canoe Club all summer, they all moved through this. And it really, it's really for everyone. And one thing I want to emphasize is, like, a lot of what we did helped these athletes get set up for success, but it was them. Like, they were the ones who took it and ran with it and took it, and their intentional training, and it was something in them that had them achieve this success. And everything that we're setting up is just sort of presenting them with the tools and the opportunity to get there. And every athlete was presented with those tools and those opportunities, and it's something sort of in them, and they really deserve that credit for having taken the tools that they were given and made something of it. So talking about the second quad, so in my mind, that's high school. And that's sort of why I like to go in 4-year chunks. High school is generally around 4 years. And sort of, socially, they're changing. They're focusing a little bit more. They still have a training group. And again, I included this picture because this was right before they left to go to Olympic Copes. I forget which year. And so they're with a group, they're with a training group who pushes each other and has, like-minded goals. But it's not necessarily based on that, like, age group gender scenario that we had in summer camp. It's based a little bit more on training age and ability and boat speed, depending on whether we're on or off the water. One thing that we really prioritized in this and continue to prioritize in this time frame is training in zone. So making sure that, if we're going GA1 or GA2 or whatever the workout is, they're actually in that zone. And making sure that, they're not training too hard or too easy, not spending too much time in, like, the middle energy systems. And then just prioritizing strength throughout the season, right? Because they're growing and they're developing. And I think that all of these things here, like, prioritizing strength, training in zone, focus on training, technical proficiency, all of these things are injury prevention, and they're self-care, and they're teaching athletes that, you need to take responsibility for your own training. And coaches are here as resources, and coaches are here to support you. But it's up to you to make those choices that this is how you're going to train. And then developing autonomy. So, in this picture, Reed is going to Olympic Hopes with them. I was lucky enough to go to Junior Worlds with them this past year. But, you're not always going to have your club coach with you, especially, if you've gone off to university and you're away from home. And so right off the bat, it's a priority for me and for the other coaches at Rideau to help the athletes grow into autonomous people. We don't want any sort of relationship of dependency where they need us. We're there in the event that they do need us, but we don't want to be sort of their be all and end all. I think that's sort of a less healthy relationship, and it's not, as Jason was saying, it's not going to set them up for success when they, you know, inevitably graduate from sport, or it inevitably becomes, you know, less of their focus. And then the other big thing that I think made a difference for these two athletes involved, this is Toshka and Marin, and then Marin's another one of our athletes who's had some international success, and this is Ella over here flexing. One of the other things that made a difference for them this particular year in Portugal when they were racing singles for, you know, to be in medal contention is that they both had previous international experience. So they had been to various Olympic hopes regattas. They had both been to Junior Worlds before, and they had actually both medaled at Junior Worlds before in crew boats. So, and it was actually when I went to Portugal with them this year, it was my first time at Junior Worlds, and so they knew way more than me when it came to racing internationally. And I saw it as a coach that there was several athletes who had that kind of experience, and the athletes who had done that before, it made a big difference in their approach to racing at Junior Worlds, and it really made the difference between just being happy that they made it, which, you know, you should be happy about that. That's amazing. But to get that performance at the next level, pretty much everyone who was striving for that performance at the next level had already been there, right? They'd already had that first time of, wow, okay, I'm racing in Europe. It's super cool. They had the confidence. They had the experience. They had kind of the hunger for it. And so they had those goals, right? They wanted this. The goal wasn't to make Junior Worlds. The goal was to perform there. And so I do think that, you know, making sure that athletes have, you know, the crew boat skills and the ability to try and gain some experience internationally beforehand does make a difference in that critical moment, right? Where it comes down to that 41 seconds where Tasha is going to have to perform. That experience mattered because it wasn't the first time she'd been there. So if that is the goal, and I'll talk a bit more about that after, but if that is the goal to have these athletes perform at the highest level, then there needs to be something to back it up. Okay, this is where I'm going to spend the most time. So one thing that we at the Rideau Canoe Club have made a big priority is supporting the athletes as people first. And this really, it came out of a need. And I've told this story a few times on various webinars and calls and stuff, but a few years ago, I forget what year, 2016 maybe, we were at Florida training camp, and we had an athlete experience like a really severe mental health crisis, like to the point where we were calling the cops, and it was really, really bad. And she was in danger. And it just hit her. It was like a gut punch. It was like, wow, she didn't see us as a resource. You know, she needed help, and she didn't have that. And some of the other athletes knew what was going on, and they didn't see us as resources either. So we were like, okay, something needs to change here. This can't be the culture of our club that the coaches don't know what's going on with their athletes. So that was the turning point, like the moment. And then it's been like a continuous cycle of work to really prioritize the human side of the athletes, even sometimes at the expense of their performance. So what we started doing is having goal meetings. So we send out a goal sheet. I can share it with you guys if you're interested. But really the first things that it asks is, it says, what are your strengths as an athlete? What do you feel you need support on as an athlete? I'm trying to remember exactly what it says. How can we as coaches support you as an athlete? What's your team goal? And then it goes into, what's your life goal? What do you want to accomplish here? And then, you know, we go to the paddling performance goals, outcome goals, and then we break it down into, you know, shorter stuff like, you know, what's your winter goal and what's your seasonal goal and all that stuff. We ask about their nutrition, we ask about their sleep, we ask about their health, we ask about their, you know, their school. Most of them are high school. and their life, and it really just opens up that conversation to starting to get to know them a little bit, and starting to support them in the way that they need to be supported or want to be supported. And it creates this partnership where we're working together towards their goals, right? It's not my goal for them to medal at the Junior Worlds. That was their goal, and that's really important to me because, you know, they are the ones doing it, and if it's really truly what they want, then that's what we'll work towards. But there's people who don't want that, and there's people who, you know, they want to paddle for high school, and then they know, they're like, well, I think probably when I go to university I'll be done, and that, if they know that, then that's like an amazing first step, right? Because transitioning inevitably to sport not being your top priority is going to happen for everyone, and we want to be there to support that for our athletes as often as possible. We always ask about their mental health, and obviously they're not required to disclose anything, but it does open the door for how we can support people. And as coaches, we are sort of in a unique position where we are a bit of an authority, right? A bit of an adult, but not really to the same extent that like a teacher or a parent is. And we sort of have this in-between role. And so maybe we're a little bit more approachable. And so making sure that we are approachable, and that if someone approaches us and says, I'm really struggling, that we're ready to hear that and to support them, whether that means finding external help or just listening, or figuring out, you know, how we can work on this together. It makes a big difference. One thing that we also include in this goal sheet is the goal of self-acceptance. And I think I don't know where I got it. I think I got it from Terry Orlick when I took his class in university. And basically it says, can you commit to being satisfied with yourself and being happy with yourself, even if you don't accomplish your performance goal? And then what they actually have to do is list 3 qualities about themselves, 3 positive qualities that have nothing to do with sport. So they can't say I'm fast or I'm strong. They have to say things like, I'm a good friend, for example, or I'm a hard worker. A little bit related to sport, but maybe not. That's kind of like an in-between one, but it's an internal quality that they have. And the criteria for it is like, it has to be true whether they accomplish their goal or not. So let's say we'd gone to Portugal and both of them didn't make it out of the heat. Those goals of self-acceptance would still be true, right? They would still be good friends. They would still be hard workers. And it is painful. It is painful to sit. We always have 2 coaches present because the rule of 2. There's 2 coaches and there's an athlete, and we're talking about their goal of self. And you would be astounded, or maybe not, of the number of teenagers who cannot say 3 good things about themselves, or even if they're thinking it, they can't say it. And so we sit there. Sometimes it's silent for several minutes while people are thinking. We prompt them. But it's, I think it's a really important process to go through. And all the other thing that it does is it gives the coach the opportunity to say, these are the things I see in you as well. So if someone says, I'm a good friend, then as a coach, my answer is, yeah, you are a good friend. For example, I've seen you step up and help your friend when they were in trouble or whatever it is. And so I think that it kind of works as like a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit. They have to say something good about themselves. And then we as coaches validate, give examples, give evidence. And then that's who they are. That becomes part of who they are. And so if they say resilient, then wow, all of a sudden they're resilient people. So I think this is one of the main reasons why I want to do the goal meetings, is because it starts to build out the athlete's identity for themselves. And it is not a small amount of work, because reading 70 odd goal sheets and having 70 odd individual meetings with 2 coaches present is a logistical challenge, and we do them, usually we're about to start now. Jason did a goal presentation last night. We sent out the goal sheet this morning, and this process is about to start for the upcoming season. And we probably will start next week, and we won't be done till January. But it's super worth it. I think it's one of the best things that our club has done to support athletes. One second. So one of the things that's really come out of these goal meetings is now goal meeting is like code a little bit. It could be mid-season or maybe in the spring. We got a lot of this during COVID. Goal meeting code for like, can we talk? But it sounds a little bit more professional. It's like, hey, can we have a goal meeting? And so we get emails like this all the time. Hey, can we have a goal meeting? I want to talk about something. So then we set it up, and it gives the athletes access to their coaches regularly beyond just the interactions that happen in practice. And sometimes, we have one goal meeting a year, and that's it. The rest of it is casual conversation before, during, and after practice. But sometimes there's athletes who need more support, and we have goal meetings with them. Goal meetings. We check in with them once a week for the entire season, because that's what they need. So we've done that for several athletes, and there are boundaries that you need to set, right? When you make yourself accessible to athletes for support, both for safe sport reasons and just for reasons of making sure that you take care of your own time and mental health and work-life balance. There are times when you have to say no, like, no, you can't text me at night. That's not appropriate, for one thing. And it also, that's my time to rest. So there is a bit of a balance that needs to be found there, between, being supportive and being accessible, and also being professional and understanding the limits of what our profession actually is, which is coaching. Not being their therapist, but maybe helping them find one. And I have this line here: choosing to support athletes as people, even at the potential expense of performance and development. So both of these athletes, both Ella and Tosh, separately, for different reasons, had moments in the past couple of years where they told us that they were probably going to be done paddling. And I don't want to get into details because it's their personal lives, but they had good reasons for it, and it was possibly one of the things they could have chosen. And Toshka had an opportunity elsewhere, and she was offered funding elsewhere, and she was going to take it. It was really important to her, and we had a choice. We were sitting there in her meeting, and we could have said, "What are you doing? That's not going to work. What about paddling? Blah blah blah." But we chose in that moment to say, "Okay, this is what you need as a person. If this is your life goal, this is what you're working, then let's do it. Let's figure this out." And same thing with Ella. She took a few weeks off. Maybe I'm done. Maybe I need a break. And it was like, if that's what you need, if that's what's best for you, if this sport is not what's best for you, then that's what we're going to do, and we're going to support that. And sometimes I think I was like, how close we came to not having these athletes attain their success. But what ended up happening is, because of those experiences, and because they were supported as people, I think partly because they were supported as people, partly I think because they're just impressive people, is that they recommitted. They changed their minds, and they said, you know what, this is actually what I want to do, and I'm all in. And I think those moments where they decided, this is what I want, I think those are important moments, because when you start in summer camp and you just kind of roll up through the age groups, and maybe you attain some success, it's almost like, well, it's just obvious that's what the next step is. But I think the intentional recommitment matters a lot. And so that's the case for these two, and I'm highlighting them because they had performances this year, but I would say that happens all the time. And sometimes people do decide to leave the sport, but again, we've talked about this. The important thing is them, right? Not how many medals are we going to win. So those things are things that are really near and dear to my heart. I know that sometimes, you know, we're a big club, and it's really not, it's not easy to form interpersonal relationships with so many people, but it is something that we really try hard to do, because I think it's the most important thing that we do as a club. And I know there's like maybe a perception that Rito's like, I've heard us called like a big machine or something like that, or maybe a perception that only high performance or only performance matters. But quite honestly, nothing could be further from the truth, because I think that the reason why we've had performances, and the reason why we are a big club, and the reason, well, one of the reasons why we're a big club, particularly why we're so big right now, and why we've had this success at a provincial and national and international level, is because every single athlete is valued as an individual. And that's on purpose. That's not an accident that just happened because one of the coaches is a nice person or something like that. That's really like an organizational goal that we've been working pretty hard on, and hopefully are going to be able to continue. So that was pretty much it. These are our athletes who were junior worlds this year, plus me. So thank you for listening. I don't even know how long that took. I think we're okay for time. I'm happy to take questions or comments. I'm going to stop share so that I can see your videos.
Hi, Cheyanne.
Hey, Cheyanne, it's Joel here.
Hey, Joel.
More of a comment. Sorry, excuse me. And I was kind of hoping Jason would still be on the call too, because it sparked from his presentation as well. And I guess a comment for Ryan and all the coaches on this call, even Oris, because I know you've been coaching for a heck of a long time too. One of the things, so first of all, I want to say I super value this approach, and I like the approach, and I think it's great. One of the things I wasn't prepared for as a coach was, for lack of a better word, the fallout of it. And so, you know, as a coach, through this approach, you have a lot of athletes coming to you first. You have a lot of athletes that come to you before they even come to their parents, before they may go seek help from a professional. And so what I found really difficult was, you know, I've had to deal with athletes coming to me who are suicidal. I've had athletes come to me dealing with coming out of the closet, their sexuality, all kinds of different things like that. And if there's anything I could say needs to get put into coach education, or as you develop this as Ontario, as you guys develop it, how do we also develop the education and the coach piece to help these athletes through some of these things, because it's hard, and I know I was not prepared when it hit me.
Yeah.
So
100%. I fully agree with you. I wasn't prepared either. I started Googling like when do you have to, someone would tell me something and I would Google like when are you required to inform parents? Like there's this whole learning curve, and there's a whole mental health system in Canada and in Ontario of, you know, who is like, you know, when do you have to take action? When do you not? When are you breaking confidentiality? When are you not? And I've been lucky enough that my paddling director works in the mental health industry at the Royal Ottawa. So he's been a really great resource. And I've connected with, I don't remember the acronym, but Krista's organization. Ryan, do you know what I'm talking about? Canadian Center for Mental Health and Sport, I think it's called. But yes, I 100%. I think that just like how, you know, no one in coach education necessarily teaches you how to load a trailer. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's things that come with coaching that are important for safety that we just never learn, except for on the job. I think this is one of them, and it's a really key one. So Ryan and I have been working on it a little bit with NCCP, but I do think it needs to be more.
Yeah. And Cheyanne, if I can jump in there, it's Eleanor McIntyre speaking. We're dealing with a similar set of circumstances in my professional life, and I think the one piece of advice I'd say there is, you're not a therapist. You're not trained as a therapist. What you need to be able to do is recognize cues and have resources that you can point the family or the athlete towards, because I think that's a big part of, if we're trying to solve everyone's problems and we're not professionals, then that is a dangerous spot to be in. So in my day job, we have mental health ambassadors in each of our business divisions, and they are trained by an outside company just on how to recognize, how to speak to people, how to help your colleagues reach out for help. And I think that's probably something we should look at in sport, so that coaches understand how to do that, because that's the role. The role isn't to be the therapist for the individual.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Sorry, it's Joel again. I agree with you 100%, Eleanor. And I agree with Cheyanne. You kind of learn by doing, but I'd almost hope the next generation of coaches doesn't have to learn by doing, because it's a scary place. And Eleanor, I get the resources and the stuff. I remember one of mine was at training camp, and I'm alone. Well, alone. I had one other coach with me, but neither of us are mental health professionals. And this comes out at a training camp, and you're like, oh God, what do I do?
Yeah,
So
and that's scary. Yeah, and I think that would be maybe something when we're planning training camps. Like, what are those local resources we could access if we need them on the spot?
Well, I'm almost thinking, does mental health first aid or something like that come into part of coach training? Can we go that kind of route of it?
yeah, and I think that, so I've taken a mental health first aid course, and they are available. And I think that, just knowing what the local resources are, I've over the years become more familiar with the ones in Ottawa, the Youth Services Bureau and TO and whatever the options are for people. But yes, I think we really need to take a look at like what our role as coaches is, because, at the end of the day, like the athletes come to you for a reason, right? Because they trust you, because you're there, because you're approachable, but you're in a position of authority. And so regardless, you're going to end up at the very least, sort of, I don't know what the better word is, but like triaging it a little bit, right? Like they come to you and you're like, what do I do now? Do I pass it on? Do I deal with this myself? And aside from wanting to do absolutely the best thing possible for the athlete, you also don't want to be negligent. So I think that's where our education needs to come in, is when certain situations come up, what do we do, and what are we required to do, and what should we do, and who can
Absolutely.
we ask for advice?
Absolutely. That is the approach that you all should be taking.
Amazing. Thanks, Cheyanne. Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Eleanor. I do want to open up, see if there's any other questions. But in terms of when we bringing this back to the three pillars, one of the key things under the athlete pillar, so the training pillar, is health and wellness are fully integrated into that. So health and therapy, wellness and mental performance. So they're not some outside thing that we just, hope someone else deals with. It's an important part of the training of the athlete. So yes, Joel, we have to build the tools and resources and training, and yes, Eleanor, great suggestions for mental health ambassadors. But bringing that as not this mysterious other, it just is part of the support that we provide the athletes. And I think what Cheyanne's shown here is that could be really impactful. That could be really meaningful, and it doesn't mean that that performance is suffered. It actually could lead to much greater performance, as seen for the success for all the athletes at Rideau, nationally and internationally. But we have to be okay that it's a priority over performance. And probably some other key takeaways for me, that it's going to be a lot of work, right? And we have to understand that it takes time. If we value it, though, we have to put in the work. And I think those athlete goal-setting meetings or check-ins, whatever you want to call them, they need to be built into our programming, because that's how we're going to find out how they're doing, how we can be supportive. So,
you know what, Ryan, it's Kim. One
Yeah,
thing
hi, Kim.
about that, too, if you're having the regular meetings and they may not have an issue, but they're building that, that they know you're someone that they can come to. That's the other part. That there's a safe environment at the club, and that if you just meet them once when just when they're training or just when they have a problem, they haven't got that feeling of safety. The environment has to be safe at the club and with the coach. Would you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a question for Cheyanne, if I can.
Mm-hmm.
It's Don Stoneman. First question is there a difference between how boys see themselves and how girls see themselves?
Yeah, so I guess the answer is yes. I can only really speak about my own experience. I do think that the majority of people who reach out to us for help beyond a regular goal meeting would be the girls or the young women. Not to say that the boys don't struggle. I think they might struggle even more, but it is significantly more difficult to kind of I don't know what the right word is, but like crack that shell a little bit and form those meaningful relationships where the boys feel comfortable talking about their struggles or even just things that can be done to support them, even if they're not struggling. I think that came out in the pandemic pretty clearly for me, that we had several goal meetings and 90% of them were with our female athletes, because they maybe, I don't know, maybe they were more comfortable talking about their feelings, but certainly the boys struggled just as much, if not more, than the girls did. I think something we also have to be aware of, and that I'm personally quite aware of as a female coach, is that I can't always be the person. And so I try really hard at every goal meeting to have, if I'm there, then have a male coach present, or if I'm not there, one of our other female coaches there, because people are going to be more comfortable talking to one coach, or maybe one gender of coach compared to the other, and I need to be aware myself that I'm not always going to be that person. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. I have another part to that question, if I can ask it, and that is, you've been coaching kids for, I guess, about 10 years. Have the kids changed? I had somebody recently who's a Dragon Boat Canada coach said that, yeah, they've changed even in the last 5 years. So.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's two parts to that. I think, yes, especially with what we've gone through in the last couple of years, but also with, a greater awareness of mental health and stuff in the mainstream. I think maybe attitudes have changed and perceptions have changed. I think it's possible that we're just maybe noticing it now, and that maybe the people who have changed are more the adults and the ones who are listening to them, and creating those environments where they can speak up and be more themselves. But I do think that the last couple of years have changed kids a little bit. But again, they've also changed us, right? And our willingness to listen and yeah. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Cheyanne.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Shai. Maybe one more question, if there's someone on the panel that has one more question for Shai. Nope. Okay, Cheyanne, tremendous. Really amazing what's going on at Rito and led by you in terms of both performance, but just a different way of supporting athletes than what's traditionally happened in sport. And I think the two are really aligned. So Thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for doing what you do. Okay, folks. So what's going to happen now for the last half an hour of the session? I appreciate it. It's been a lot.